For those of you who have been sleep deprived enough to hallucinate, what was it like? In college, I tried to hold down a donut delivery job while taking a full credit load. I got up at 4:30 AM to deliver, and often was up until midnight or even later. After a particularly busy week with almost no sleep, I hallucinated a man crossing the street right in front of me while delivering, and I slammed on my brakes to avoid hitting him. When I realized that there was no one in the crosswalk, and no one anywhere in sight, I finished my deliveries and immediately quit my job. I once spent 3 days without sleep. By the third day everything was in soft focus. Colors were wrong and I was hearing voices whispering my name. I do not recommend it. May I ask why you didn't sleep for so long? I was young, dumb and determined to burn the candle at both ends. It was 3 days of working, partying and video games. I'm too old for that nowadays. I love my bed too much. I was in Costa Rica patrolling the beaches every night to find sea turtles laying their eggs. It was a Rico vacation thing, so during the day we would be up and exploring the area. I don't know how they expected people to function on like 3 hours of sleep for a week. But we did it. I mostly remember super irrational thoughts. Thinking animal noises were people talking. Thinking monkeys were dogs up in the trees. But the hallucinations were crazy. I'm not sure if the beach really was glowing some, or if I was making all of it up. But my mind was making crazy glowing patterns in the sand. I thought the glowing stuff was also biting me. Really, it was sand fleas. We would stop and take a break mid-patrol. I'd lay down to rest and think I was still walking. Then wake up and keep walking. I got really confused as to when I was awake. Never saw F-King sea turtle. When I had a new baby, I was in Target with a baby and got a call from an officer. Turns out I had left every single door of my car open. He thought it was a break-in. It was not. Just me sleep deprived. Why was there any reason to open every door in the first place? Life with a fresh human is rough. The first week of me having my daughter I had slept 7 hours total. I couldn't complete taking a shower that week because every time I'd start I'd hear my daughter crying hysterically and my fiance screaming my name. I'd frantically run out of the bathroom to find my daughter peacefully asleep and fiance in the room with her. Scary enough, it always happens while driving. I wouldn't say I'm hallucinating so much as dreaming with my eyes open. The darkness begins to creep in from the side until you're somewhere else for what feels like you've always been there. Then you feel your eyes open and bam. Adrenaline. Only lasts for a moment until the same darkness begins creeping from the side again and you're doing everything you can to keep your eyes open. But keeping them open doesn't help. I used to have episodes of insomnia as a teenager. Once, while walking home from school, I saw a car driving in my direction. It suddenly veered onto the sidewalk, continued toward me, and swerved back onto the road moments before hitting me. I thought it was real, but I was so out of it from exhaustion that I didn't even flinch. I realized a few days later that the curb of the sidewalk was too high for a car to have possibly driven over. It's honestly scary. Like one time I was on the verge of falling asleep and I thought I felt somebody run their finger across my cheek. When I snapped upright into a sitting position, nobody was there. I live alone BTW. I'm sure I hallucinated it, but that shit is scary regardless. The same thing happened to me when I was a kid. I was just falling asleep and then I feel a hand on my head and I jerk up and search my whole room. I didn't sleep that night. For context, this happened during some military training. Laying down in the woods desperately trying to stay awake. Usually the plants turn into people. Like you'll see a figure walking around out in front of you, and then come to and realize it was just a sapling or a bush or something. Happened surprisingly more during the day than the night. I had a similar experience during military training. It was really dark out, and I hadn't slept for at least 48 hours. I saw and heard several people crawling towards me in the bushes and I thought it was part of the exercise as we were on guard duty. Just laying in the mud watching the woods. I called out to them several times. And my sergeant even had to go into the bushes to convince me there was no one there. It's a common occurrence for me. Nothing too out there, though, usually just visual aberrations. Like constantly seeing shadows moving in my peripheral vision. Mistaking random objects for completely different objects. etc. Plus occasional auditory disturbances along with a typical sense of displacement. Once or twice I had instances where familiar people were complete strangers. No recognition whatsoever. That was pretty trippy and more than a little terrifying. I sat down on the couch at 6:59 PM not sure if I should go to bed then, after not sleeping at all the night before, or try and force myself to stay up another few hours so that I wouldn't wake up too early the next day and throw off my whole sleep cycle. Well, I felt like I couldn't even force my eyes open another minute. The next thing I know I am waking up and it feels like it is the middle of the night and I am wide awake and mad at myself for letting myself fall asleep that early and throwing off my whole sleep cycle, but it is what it is now. I get up and go to make myself some tea and the time on the stove catches my eye and it says 7:00. So I assume it is 7 AM and I must have slept a lot longer than I thought and I didn't throw my sleep cycle off after all. But then I see it is kind of dark out. So I'll look at my calendar on my phone. It is 7 PM on the same day I sat on the couch. Literally only 60 seconds had passed since I sat down and contemplated trying to keep myself awake. Still can't figure out how it happened. I have exploding head syndrome. I'll be honest. With a name like that I assumed it had something to do with one's head exploding. It's very poorly named. It was the weirdest thing. I was taking notes on an extremely boring video in theology, but then words started appearing on their own without me writing anything. They were dancing around for a bit and I found it completely normal for a bit, but then I realized that words aren't supposed to dance. Then I snapped back to reality with nothing on my paper. So, Nightmare on Elm Street. Either that or the reading rainbow is a lot trippier than I remember. Very calm as far as hallucinations go. I had driven for 20+ hours and was in the Arizona-California desert. It was the middle of the night. It had been dark for hours and only other car lights and stars were visible. Started seeing things out of the corner of my eyes. Just kind of objects off a distance on the side of the road. Then it was things in the road ahead. That got my attention. After a bit I started seeing fantastic meteor light showers in the sky. Wasn't scary or anything. Didn't stop driving. To be young, dumb, and invincible again. When Need for Speed Underground 2 came out on PS2 I stayed up for 3 days. Aside from being extremely tired and vision hearing being very impaired. Everything was mostly normal. Until I woke up standing inside Subway probably 10 miles away with no memory of how I got there. I guess I was hungry. Subway. In Jared's basement. You'll be getting Jared's footlong alright. While deployed overseas with lack of sleep for like 70+ hours. I would black out and re-experience dream completely different scenarios that happened days prior. It was crazy. Like deja vu. But for like an hour. I'd snap out of it and be completely confused for like 30 seconds. Wondering which experience was real. Whoa. This sounds crazy. Like a movie plot lol. I can't even begin to imagine how that must feel. 70+ hours. Yup. I would work 12 hours 6 days a week. And the 7th day was a 6-hour shift. For a total of 78 hours per week. It's exhausting. But you got used to it since you had to accept your new reality. Going back to 8-hour shifts after deployment felt like I was working half days. Mostly auditory for me. Like whispers or someone saying my name. WTF, that's scary. I often hear my name as I fall asleep. Sometimes random voices and sometimes specific people like my sister or boss or mom. Sometimes I barely know them but I can place the voice easily. Me and my brother were road tripping across America to California and taking 4-hour shifts of driving non-stop, and I have a really set sleeping schedule that really did not coincide with my shifts unfortunately. This ended up with me seeing everything start turning into faces, like road signs, and the backs of cars would look at me angrily. I can also remember seeing giant frogs and a giant mustache on the road in front of me. None of these hallucinations looked very real, but my eyesight was pretty fuzzy and bad at that point, so at the time they kinda looked like everything else but kinda translucent. IDK if this counts, but yeah. We were having a test on our physical and mental strength during our military service a month ago. Of which one part was to walk for about 3 full days and nights, with some breaks. Not for sleep though. Started walking with my eyes closed after a while. And I can only explain it like I was sleeping while walking. With my legs doing their own thing. Sometimes with my eyes open. Sometimes with them closed. I fell in and out of dreaming the entire time. Partly lucid for the first time ever. It was quite surreal. Although to be fair, I didn't have enough energy to truly experience it to its fullest. It included taking the bus home. Food. Getting shot at. Food. The ground starting to disappear under our feet and us having to run the opposite direction. Just giving up and wanting to sleep in a ditch. That part may have been real. And food. Used to overwork myself to the point of hallucinations fairly regularly. Most were auditory. I'd hear someone talking nearby, usually saying my name or just a couple of muffled syllables. Bits of songs. Like having an earworm except louder. Lol. A distant ringing telephone was also common. Less commonly I'd hear something loudly falling somewhere. Visually. I'd mostly see flashes of color or blackness in the periphery of my vision. Like when someone walks by and you just barely see them out of the corner of your eye. Tall figures in the room, such as a coat on a rack, would also briefly appear to be a person standing there. Those were probably the most startling to me. University student. During finals week my freshman year I forgot to take off work and ended up having to work from like 4 to 10 PM. Get off. Go to the library till like 5 to 6 AM. My lib is open 24 hours. Wake up. Take the final at 8. And just study more until I had work next. I remember when I'd get back to my dorm room around 5:30 it'd be completely dark. And I'd be seeing the craziest f-king colors. I've dabbled psychedelics a little and it's literally just like that. Like a small 10-minute acid trip before I'd completely ass out. Might get a brain tumor by age 40, but hey. Absolutely killed my finals that year. Never had audio hallucinations like the rest of these comments say though. Chronic insomniac here. I have lots of stories, especially sleep paralysis, that happened twice. I legit thought I was dying when the hooded man without a face hovered next to my bed. I also woke up one morning after a restless night to see a girl standing by my bed in a white nightgown. I shrugged it off and rolled over. It wasn't until I woke up later that I realized what happened. I did a major cleanse that night and never saw her in my apartment again. This was years ago. Over one summer in high school, my friends and I stayed awake for a few days playing Dungeons and Dragons and other RPGs. We had tons of sugar and caffeine to help us play through the pain. I was laying on the couch staring at the ceiling and I saw a leprechaun, may have been a gnome. Hard to tell from that distance, walk into view standing on the ceiling. He looked down at me, smiled and doffed his hat to me, and started to dance a jig. I said to myself, oh hell no, and buried my head in the pillow until I fell asleep. Back when I was younger my whole family left to France. It's literally thousands of km away. I was home alone for a month. I've never been scared of being home alone and I knew I can do everything by myself. I'm in a wheelchair so it could be an issue for most, and I could always call my neighbors etc. But for some reason I just couldn't sleep. Always been a night owl kind of person anyways though. So, in all these 30 days I slept maybe 1-4 a day. Maximum. Oftentimes staying up for days. A friend of mine I Skyped with once said I fell asleep with my eyes open. When it comes to hallucinations, I'm pretty sure I saw my walls moving kind of like waves. When looking around everything seemed to be moving in a weird way. It was too realistic. But I knew it isn't real. Nothing bad ever happened though. I was fine and as soon as my family got back, I was able to sleep properly too. Colicky baby woke up every 45 minutes for 6 months straight. It would take 20 minutes to get her back to sleep, leaving me 25 minutes of sleep until I was awoken back up. Not enough for a REM cycle. I once was in line at the grocery store, blinked or something, and the cashier just disappeared. How long was I standing there? Did I pay for my stuff? No idea what happened. Another time I was waiting in a downpour at a crosswalk for the walk symbol. A homeless man also waiting was yelling about how he lost his umbrella. Suddenly my umbrella disappeared from my hand. I look back at the homeless man thinking he's wiped it, but there is no homeless man. Also the sun is out and the sidewalk is bone dry. I guess I was walking down the street with my arm up like I was holding an umbrella. Too many stories like that. I had a terrible cough. So bad that I'd cough myself awake and ended up staying awake for days on end. At the end of it I was hallucinating there's something in the kitchen. Repeating that over and over again. I had a sense of impending doom, like there was some sort of overwhelming thing increasingly progressing towards some tipping point where something terrible was going to happen. It's hard to really convey, but it was terrifying. Shadows creeping up the walls. But it's complete blackness and tendrils consuming everything. Or skittering shadows in my peripheral that look like people, animals, or bugs moving, whispering, talking, or worse, singing. Sometimes I'll hear what sounds like music playing, and when I try to figure out where it comes from it disappears. So I go back to whatever I was doing, and then I'll start hearing children singing or people talking, footsteps, or a door closing. I get this from insomnia, before I have a seizure, or if I get too overwhelmed or overtaxed. This happened to me once when I was driving home late at night. I know looking back I should have pulled over. I was driving down a country road and thought I saw a giant brick wall blocking the road, so I slammed on the brakes. This woke me up immediately, and when I looked at the road again the wall was gone and realized I had hallucinated it. Moral of the story is, if you ever feel yourself falling asleep behind the wheel, don't try to tough it out. You should pull over and walk around a bit to wake yourself up. Fucking scary, man. In boot camp for our final phase we were forced to stay up for 3 days straight. By our 60+ I was hearing people call my name. Shadow people darting in and out of my periphery. Falling into micro sleeps and waking up confused and completely disoriented. Was a trip. The only way we made it was cause my division was super cool with each other by that time. I once went 4 days and 3 nights without sleep. I didn't see anything that wasn't there, but my view of the world was strange. I thought the staircase was moving and I heard a lot of noises and voices that weren't really there. They were mostly memories that were recreating themselves because my brain wasn't firing properly. I felt like a ghost version of myself that was only mostly there. Eater. I forgot to mention my cat. I have a cat and I would randomly step over her while I was walking, except that she wasn't there. I'd feel her jump in my lap and I'd go to pet her. No cat. This was pretty constant on day 4. I stayed awake for 3 days, or in other words 2 consecutive nights without sleep. I was feeling too sleepy when bored but too awake when excited. Bodily sensations messed up, sometimes more other times less. Sense of hearing reduced, but it was cool. Distant sounds were moped. Vocals were loud. Vision became less saturated, everything looked boring. I don't know if it's hallucination. I could no longer differentiate between daydream imagination and real dream. Often felt disconnected from real world. But nothing too extreme like seeing visuals or hearing voices. Oh cool. Finally one I can reply to. I have an insane imagination. Thanks to having Asperger's syndrome and ADHD. So it's pretty hard to imagine what insane stuff I'd see as a hallucination. I once went 3 days without sleep. And I began hallucinating. The easiest way to put it is to think of ants walking in straight lines on the floor and up walls and on the roof. Making grids like in an early test of a video game. Where nothing has texture. And then to feel all of the ants' individual footsteps. Edit. I've seen some people commenting about hearing voices. Just realized I did as well. It was like hearing conversations behind me and not being able to make out what they're saying. I'll frequently think someone is calling my name or saying something to me. I'll also typically hear and partially see things as if I'm living out a dream. Once, when I was sleep deprived, I was writing something down, looked up, and I saw the wall in front of me. But I also saw strobe lights, shadows running around, and I heard voices and Celine Dion singing. When I looked back down at my page, it was covered in scribbles I didn't remember making. Really weird shit. I also thought I saw a cow in my backyard once. I get auditory hallucinations mostly. Like I can hear music playing. Or people talking. Once at a LAN party we were playing Rainbow Six. No, not Siege, but Raven Shield, and all night I kept having to shoo away my friends' dogs cause they kept getting up and licking my damn hand every now and then. It wasn't until morning that they told me the dogs had been locked out all night. Well, I hope it was a hallucination. For me, people kind of stuttered like a scratched DVD and then they were suddenly doing things that they were not in real life. Then they would stutter again and snap back into place wherever they actually were. Everything was in real time and I heard everything that was actually happening around me, so the disconnect of what I was hearing versus what I saw was really confusing and freaky. Felt a lot like dreaming, honestly. I'd be talking to someone then all of a sudden be snapped out of it and realize they couldn't possibly have been there. And it happened over and over when my mind started to put its guard back down. Lots of hearing voices behind me or from another room when my brain was reminding me I shouldn't be seeing them, yet was still tricked into hearing them. Culminated in a seizure eventually. Prior Coast Guard and it was hurricane season in the southeast US. Storms has knocked several hundred buoys off station and we put out a notice to mariners saying so until we could fix it. Large tanker didn't bother to read the message and update charts. Steamed up the ICW and knocked out 700 buoys and 14 ranges, large 50-250 feet wooden structures in the water with lights. Then recreational boaters ran aground all day and required towing rescue. Thus it begins. 7 weeks of 7-day work weeks and 16 hours work days. Small crew and standing duty had me eventually at 74 hours of no sleep. The last 12 hours were like a fog. Your mind is hazy slow. Every voice sound seems muffled. And you aren't aware of your own muscle movements. I set reminders on my phone to eat, drink water as my body was too numb to feel the pressures of starvation, dehydration. The hardest part is trying not to fall asleep in the 5 minutes you sit down to take a shit. When we finally pulled into home port and I got to rack out, I slept for damn near 26 hours. Waking up was worse. You know that feeling when you're sick and take NyQuil or any other PM drowsy drug and wake up? It was like that times 10. Cotton mouth. Confusion with my surroundings. Splitting headache. Etc. 3/10. Would not recommend. F-king arsehole captains. At the beginning of the summer I took 2 part-time jobs. One working early in the morning at a coffee shop and the other as a closer for a sandwich shop. Both places had beepers and noises that trained employees to know when a customer entered or an order came through. I wouldn't get a lot of sleep. I would wake up in the middle of the night to one of these noises and think I was at work. In my underwear. Not fun, and had to quit one of them. Less hallucinations and more becoming convinced that I was becoming aware of some underlying subtext behind everything people said to me. Basically I was certain that I could discern the real emotional context behind the most mundane social interactions. Once I rested I realized I was full on delusional.